And your name, sir?
My name's Pete Fawcett. I wrote most of Gunboat. My colleagues might get a bit upset if I say I wrote all of it, but I did the bulk of it. It was a company called Five Ways Software based in Birmingham, and it had been set up as doing educational software at the time when there was a big boom in that and a big government funding things, and they used to write for research machines, and they used to take students on post A level. Before it was called gap years, but they were gap years for university, and we had a couple of dozen of those. I think they paid us enough just to keep us from starving, but we mainly did it because it was all new and it was a job in coding, programming, which was just so exciting that because it was all computing had been developing for a long time, but we were one of the first generations to have come actually computers in schools. The BBC Micro, what you got over there, the TRS-80 or the Trash 80 as it was sort of sometimes disparagingly called. So it was all new and exciting, and I still find it exciting. So this was 1983. I started my job there. So we published a lot of educational stuff. We did some home stuff, and we worked with MacMillan Publishers. And then the market changed because the government funding changed behind educational software, and so there was a move into games as more commercially viable. And so Macmillan will talk about it, and we had the excitement of going from all the way down to London into the Macmillan offices. We thought we'd made the big time. We were there in London, and the Iranian embassy siege had just not long finished. Big splash on the news, TV footage of windows blowing out and balaclavaed soldiers abseiling down and diving into windows, and we thought we were going to cash in on that. So we designed a game around effectively the Iranian embassy siege, sort of. It wasn't. It was much more. The enemies that you were shooting were all robots and Daleks and sort of pseudo Daleks and that. So it was tried to be. It wasn't as we try not to be too bloodthirsty about it. But it was stun grenades and machine guns and animated characters that you could control, jump, dive, squat down. You had to sort of dive through windows. It started off as a big strategy. It was going to be we were going to make plans and then you had to execute the plans. But it got simpler as it went on because we were trying to cram it into what we could actually manage to do.
Yeah.
The Spectrum at the time was 48k RAM and I think 6 3/4 was the video memory, and so we weren't have a lot, and you had to get all your graphics. Everything was in there. It was inspired. The actual style of the game was isometric projection. It was like Night Law had been a big hit by Ultimate, I think. It did,
Ultimate, yes.
Yeah. And we thought that looks good. That's the sort of thing we want. But we're going to go one better. We're going to do it in colour. We like to make things difficult for ourselves, and we sort of got it to work. It was all. We did it by sort of colour background, and most of the foreground was black. But it was, it was isometric projection, and you could sort of run up this way or that way, and jump on top of things, or in fact, if you get two, sometimes you had to get two of your commandos together, and one would jump on and stand on the shoulders of the other one to get over an obstacle or things like that. They were all based on me, which was I was looked a bit slimmer in those days. I remember being around the back of our office building, crouching down, jumping, walking, sort of diving, and my colleague taking photographs, and then our graphics artist would hand digitise them. She had a square of acetate with a grid on it, place it over the photos, and then that would give us our digitisation, because it wasn't high resolution stuff on the Spectrum, but it was
But the process sounds quite similar to Jordan Mechner when he did Prince of Persia, shooting footage of his brother. Overlaying like that and creating the animation cycles and sequences for the prince.
Yes, yeah. That's effectively what we did. That was quite good fun, really. Effectively, in the end, it wasn't so much a strategy. It was more of a puzzle. It was a puzzle game. You had to. There were 4 levels, I think. I can't remember how. It was all on a grid, and there were sort of 4 level rooms. But you had to, for example, there was a lever in one room, patrolled by some robot. You had to sort of chuck a stun grenade in, get in, pull the lever, and that would open a door in another part of the building or activate a lift in the part of the building. So you had to move your men at different places and get one person to do one thing and one thing to do another. We used Lego. We plotted it all out on Lego. So I fished out my childhood Lego, which my mum had kept it all on in a sort of big box. So I brought that into the office, and we bought some big baseboards, and then we sort of built things with blocks so that we knew that we could lay it out, and then we knew that if we put that there, and this sort of electrified bit here that there wasn't enough space to get through, or this robot couldn't get through there. So yeah, we did it all in sort of in Lego like that to get the actual dynamics, and then just sort of code it up. At one point, we even had it where you switch between the different ones, and the other people would actually keep on doing what you'd left them to do, but couldn't get the speed out of it. It was a bit sluggish when you got if you got too many things going on in one room, it tended to go a little bit. But we reckon it was just about fine. Strikeforce was mainly me coding. I'm trying to remember, and then we had a graphics artist.
And did the company give you a deadline of how long to work on?
Well, effectively, it was a publisher deadline. By this point, there were the three of us running the company. Oh. So yes, it was just the three of us running it. I would have been 21 or something, and my Les was 3 or 4 years older, and then Cheryl, our artist, was about a similar age.
Yeah.
No, there was no project management or nothing. It was just a sort of, the publishers had a deadline, and I can't remember how long it took. We were working ridiculous hours to get it, because it just.
Oh, really?
Oh yes. I mean, there would be times when we'd be working. I mean, not quite through the night, but we get up early, we go into work, we work till late in the evening. We go for a drink on the way, and we get to bed late, we work up early, get back in the office. But we were young.
Well, yeah.
And we were young, and we loved what we were doing. It was exciting, and it was, it was a technical challenge, and and we could get things to work, and it was.
And you worked on all 3 platforms?
Yes, we published on Spectrum, Commodore, and the Amstrad. We started on the Spectrum because we knew that best. That was probably a mistake, which we rectified when we got to Gunboat. The reason mistake is the Spectrum was a lot quicker than the Commodore. Okay. When we got to the Commodore, it was really quite challenging to get it to any sort of speed.
Yeah.
The ruse that we had to try and get some publicity for this is that we had a section where you chose your squad. So you had to choose 4 out of 8 commandos to go in and do it, and they each had a little bio and a digitised picture, and we basically got 8 of the magazine reviewers to come to MacMillan to have their photographs taken to put them in the game. So we sort of thought they might at least review the game if they, and it seemed to work. I'm not sure they gave us great reviews, but it did actually get into the magazines. Yeah. So, well, as it happened, they were only able to get 7 of them, so the 8th one ended up being me. So I got sort of digitised in there as well. So not only am I the figure rolling, that there's one of the, but we had to sort of, it was a bit of window dressing, and what we ended up doing was we had to sort of cheat by we loaded those up into the video memory. So we had a logo. I don't know if you remember Spectrum tapes loading, and so there would be a logo would come up while the main game loaded, and then when it got to the end, it actually wrapped round and overwrote and loaded on top of the logo screen with these 8 pictures. Yeah. And the bios, and so the initial bit of the code was using all this stuff that was there. So once you chose them, you lost all that, so you couldn't go back and rechoose them without reloading the game. But we thought it was we managed to make the best of these other situations. So yeah, that was that's how we tried to get some publicity for it. And yeah, I say in the end it was a good puzzle game, and I thought we did quite well. Games play, we weren't very experienced at it, and we weren't great gamers ourselves.
You were your own game testers, I guess.
Oh, that was it. Yeah, there was just us. There wasn't that sort of let's try this on lots of people and see if it's too difficult or too easy or something. It was a bit. Other companies at the time may have done it better, which is possibly why they came up with some better games than we did. But yeah, anyway, it did well enough that they. Go on.
I was going to ask, at what point do you find out, that the game is doing well, for your company? How does that information come back to you?
I think that the publisher, they must have. I think he did well enough that they wanted us to do some more, but I don't remember getting any sort of any bonus for it. I don't think it was that well, but I think it did okay. But I had no idea what the sales figures were like, or I don't even know how big the market was at that point. It was all a bit, we were a bit sort of isolated from that. Then they asked us to do another one, and that turned out to be Gunboat, and we'd learnt from some of our errors in the previous doing Strikeforce Cobra, And we programmed it on the Commodore first, because the Commodore we realised was actually the slowest platform. So we thought, if we can get it to go on the Commodore, then the other ones will be much easier.
Yeah.
And we went for a sort of layered scrolling one, because it's just less complicated. It gives a pseudo 3D effect, but without the isometric projection is quite tricky to work out what you draw. You have to sort. You have all your sort of blocks, and then you have to sort it from the back and work out what bits you've got to redraw.
Yeah.
And when we did the Commodore, when we did the Strikeforce Cobra, it was all done. It was called off screen. So you basically had a screen buffer, and then you wrote it. You sort of drew it all there, composited it there, and then copied it onto the screen to get the updates going. But in Gunboat, we come up with a technique, and we didn't need a whole duplicate screen. We did it in Windows, so we had a lot more free memory to play with. The tricky thing about the Commodore is it was, when you wanted to scroll it horizontally, you had an awful lot of memory to shift. And the initial go at it just sort of went, it sort of wobbled across. But we came up with, because there was a mode on the Commodore where you could have like user-defined fonts. So you define your character codes in memory here. So yeah, it was effectively your own fonts, and then you'd write ABC. So we did it so that the screen effectively said A B C D E F G, all the characters 0 to 255 probably, and then we drew into the buffer, so we drew into what was really the font definition. And then that mapped it onto there, because that bit was done in hardware. So that when you wanted to scroll it, yes, you moved 1 byte, and that moved a whole 8x8 grid. So the scrolling would make the scrolling work. But it was tricky, because one would only work for about a third of the screen, so we had to use, there was these interrupt timers you could get as the horizontal, as the vertical scan went down. You could set it to give you an interrupt when the vertical scan hit a particular point. And so when it hit, we switched it to another buffer, and then we hit it, we switched it to another buffer, but anyway, that was quite fun. And it worked. You had a nice scrolling game, and then yes, and I think we just thought, well, what would we like to do if we had a gunboat, and then we drew out this plan of channels, and we thought, oh, well, yeah, right, we've got to go to here and hit that, and refuel here, and we built in some nice guided missiles, and just hit them, and it went. It was just lots of bangs and crashes, and we decided that's what seemed to be popular, so that's what we put in. And,
just stepping back from the programming side of things.
Yeah, sorry, I'm boring on about the code.
Well, no. I was just interested in the idea, because you explained where the idea for Strikeforce Cobra came from. But the idea for Gunboat, was that from a world event or anything?
No, I don't think so. I think that was just I think we looked around and we thought, it's a bit of a haze. Clearly, yes, all the late nights had played havoc with my memory. But I know it was.
The idea gets pitched.
Yes. I think we sort of probably did some mock-up sketch, like storyboard stuff, and said we probably tried to get the sort of scrolling technique. Could we demonstrate that in a sort of that it looked feasible? It wasn't like Strikeforce for the Iranian, but it was just what could we do? And I think we looked around at what else was around and thought it was a bit different to some of the other stuff. Really, yeah. So yes, sort of. Yeah, fairly. I think it's just sort of something. Yeah, we looked around and came up with it and said that was it.
Now, both of these games had 2 bites of the cherry, I suppose, because they were both released at full price.
Yeah.
And then they were released as budget titles as well.
Yeah.
Is that something else as well that you saw?
No, that was. I didn't know that had happened. I mean, I think because Five Ways Software sort of wound up in 1988. I think the bundle. I think that post-dates us. I think that was the publishers, because the publishers had the right. So that was just their decision. I think I only came across it when we started getting internet. I was googling stuff, or probably wasn't even Google, Yahoo, searching, and I came across them on that bundle. But no, I wasn't. Okay. Yeah, we'd not been aware of that.
Well, one thing you did mention to me just before we started recording was you've kept all of the code for these games. Is that right?
Well, I think I have actually got. I think I probably have got the code.
Yeah.
I've got, copies of the original packaging games as published, and for a while I did have the backups, because we used to develop on research machines. We didn't develop on the because you couldn't did proper development on a Spectrum with a rubber keyboard, and that wasn't. So we used to write on research machines. We had 380Zs and later 480Zs, and we even got to a stage where we had a network with an enormous 20 megabyte shared hard drive and things like that. But we used to back up onto 8-inch floppies, and I think for a while I used to have the source code. We originally developed a sort of machine independent language, a little bit above assembler. And so you had a sort of a runtime. It's not that dissimilar to Java in the way you had a runtime for the platform you were working on. You had a standard graphics library, and then you had code that was written in this sort of pseudo assembler, and that would assemble down to a bytecode which could be run by on a 64 and a Z80 or 6502 or whatever. So that's how it was done. In the end, on these ones, we end up going back to assembler just to squeeze out the performance and the memory. I mean, I remember spending, towards the end of some of the development, spending several days combing through the code, trying to squeeze out, and end up squeezing about 20 bytes or 100 bytes or something. Tiny. You had to just trying to get it more and more complex, so you could get that last little bit of functionality you needed for it. But
it's interesting to hear just how much passion and pride and effort was put into these games, because so often I think from the consumer's point of view, we only really saw anything about the games from the viewpoint of the magazine journalists. So they only have limited page space anyway.
Oh yeah.
So to hear what goes on with, let's say, a game like Strikeforce Cobra or Gunboat is people are always pushing themselves. I just kind of get the impression that the purpose of making these games was to go through to learn, to continue, and then to take what you've learned from the previous game on into the next one.
It was. And it was, we had great fun doing it. Yeah. It was hard work, but it was great fun. And you felt, I mean, it's real sort of nerdy stuff, but, I'm a nerd. So but you got really, really in-depth in these machines. I can't remember all of it now, of course. But I knew on the Commodore, I knew which port you had to tweak to get the sound. The sound chip was on the ports that the sound chip was on, the ports that this was on. On the Spectrum, that was all a lot more simpler. Really, there was only with the video, but you knew it in a really intimate detail. You had it in your head.
Yeah.
You knew what. Not long after that, after these things were published, it got to the point you couldn't keep all that in your head. You got the next generation was starting to come out, the Amiga and the Atari 520, and you look at the spec for them and you think, wow, that's amazing. It's got this, it can do this, it can do that. But you start to get a point there, you couldn't keep it all in your head. You couldn't. I think it would be. You couldn't have a one-man. You couldn't really produce something, even like with a one or two-man thing. You needed specialists, and you needed specialists. You needed sound specialists, and video specialists, and we saw that. We saw the beginnings of that, and now it's like, you're making a movie. Isn't it? It's like Hollywood.
Exactly, yeah.
You've got cast of thousands of people involved in producing. Again, it's probably not thousands, but you've got huge cast of people producing a game. It's just it's a different world.
Did you stop after Gunboats?
One of the other things we did for MacMillan, Flunky was the second one. There was Flunky and there was Trapdoor by Don. Names escape me. So this guy had written Trapdoor. Yes, for the Spectrum. And MacMillan came to us and said, we want to publish these on the Commodore and the Amstrad. Can you port them for us? And we said, yeah, no problem. Anyway, so they were great. They were wonderfully creative, the original work for them. And we ported them. And thankfully, despite the Commodore being quite a lot slower in the Spectrum, that the actual, the game, it was interesting. The contrast I sort of said before, that we thought we were, and we were pretty good technically. Our games design was not so good.
Yeah.
Trapdoor had great games design. The actual coding was a bit what it needed to be, but thankfully we could improve the performance of it, so we actually could get it to run quick enough on the Commodore and the Amstrad. And Yeah, and they were probably much better sellers than anything we wrote, which was, I suppose, might have been a bit galling. So yeah, we did other things as well, but I don't think we originated anything after that. No, I think most of the other things I can remember predated that.
But still fun times in the whole, I guess, because that's why you come back visiting a place like this.
Well, yes. I thought, oh, well, I'll just go on those. I mean, I went some years ago now to the Science Museum in London with some of my children, and we were working around the computer. I go, oh, I used to work on one of those, and I used to work on one of those. And they go, oh, Dad. But now I'm still a software developer, and I still love it. So I've been really lucky. I've worked over 40 years now, and I still love what I do. So I'm very fortunate in that. But it's it's good, and it's nice to talk about it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pete.
Okay, thank you.